Yeah, CFPB is on the chopping block. And I want to see if, you're going to be for or against it. Just for some background, the CFPB, as you know, it's a regulatory agency established in the apocalyptic aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. This is Section 10. Yeah, Section 10 of the Dodd-Frank Act, and it's considered Elizabeth Warren her brainchild. And, the goal of CFPB was basically to fight for everyday Americans. So we try to protect them from shady bankers, payday lenders, credit card sharks.
We've got other organizations or agencies so that you don't buy a toaster and it explodes. She wanted to do the same thing
You want to do the same thing for banks.
Slide it in, flip it on, hear the baby cry, run down to the other end of the house, stay down there just a little longer than you thought, and when you came back, the flames would be leaping off the toast 6 to 8 inches. Your toaster might be near your kitchen curtains, catch the curtains on fire, and then catch your kitchen cabinets on fire. Ask me how I know. And then along came a federal agency, Consumer Product Safety Commission, and they said, enough, we're done. And that was it.
Yeah. So it was set up under the wake, and they really went to town. So, maybe there are a couple examples you've already heard of. There was the Wells Fargo fake account scandal. That was 2016. Maybe you heard about it. Basically, the salespeople there were opening up millions of unauthorized accounts. CFB fined them with a $100 million fine. This was September 2016. Another example, Citibank.
$100 million. That's pretty high.
It's not a. I thought you were going to say it wasn't a lot.
Sorry to interrupt, but while editing, I found some more information. Since 2016, the SEC and DOJ continued their prosecutions, and in February 2020, Wells Fargo agreed to settle to the tune of $3 billion.
You'll see some of these other ones get kind of crazy. So the most recent one, so I think 2013, they came in case, it was Lexington Law. They slapped a fine on them for, I think, like 2.7 billion.
Wow.
Yeah.
The CFPB, a law firm?
CFPB. No. Yeah. So they went after them. And basically
inflation's really caught up.
What they were doing was like, the outfits, there was a telemarketing scam. And kind of what they're doing, I guess it sounded like this, Lexington Law would promise we'd help fix your credit. But in the meantime, was just like charging a bunch of legal fees. Anyway, 2.7 billion.
Isn't that what all of law is?
2.7 billion in consumer redress. They couldn't pay it, filed bankruptcy. I think the CFPB actually managed to claw like 1 point something billion that they're going to be distributing out to a bunch of people. So like, they're busy.
I don't know if you're going to bring this one up, but it's the Capital One. I don't know if it's a lawsuit that they do, but like the CFPB went after Capital One recently, and it was more or less because they didn't raise their interest rates on their checkings and savings accounts enough.
Oh, yeah. So now you're starting to get into some of the reasons why Trump and the CFPB's critics want to kill it. The first one is that they are considered unaccountable to Congress, both in the sense of funding and with appointments. Now, this was somewhat addressed, but there were two pretty big legal cases that were brought against the CFPB. The Sheila Law, SEILA law versus the CFPB, that basically challenged, they said it was unconstitutional, the fact that basically the president could not remove the head of the CFPB. And so that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And I think in like 2020, it was, agreed that the president should have the power to remove the, director. They didn't have to just be quote unquote for cause. The other major case that was brought against the CFPB had to do around its appropriations. So the other thing that the critics really don't like is that the CFPB doesn't get its money from Congress per se. It gets it from the Federal Reserve. So they're capped. They sort of sit in the Federal Reserve and they basically tell the Board of Governors, I need X amount of dollars, with a cap of like 12% of the Federal Reserve's overall budget. And
that's how Liz Warren made it to like $10 million, huh?
Yeah. So those are kind of the first reason. The other thing is that they've been accused of is having the slush fund. So like, it's sort of like a shakedown mechanism. The CFPB will shake down these banks. They'll kind of come up with some reason. They'll go
just
after.
Keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, they'll extract however much money they can, and then they'll turn around and like feed politically relevant or like politically adjacent.
On the same political team.
Yeah, what you can imagine that so they don't like that. One of the other major flashpoints that happened around the CFPB had to do with sort of this payday lending rule. So this is kind of getting into the de facto legislator, that angle. Out of Dodd-Frank, there came a couple laws. One of them had to do with the UDAP. So UDA, now that stands for unfair, deceptive, and abusive. And those are kind of like broad terms. And, over the years, the CFPB have been able to kind of grab onto those terms and sort of expand them and shape them into something that could be useful for maybe kind of what their own vision is of how, markets should be regulated. And along that same angle, kind of the payday, the vehicle title, and a certain high cost installment loans rule, that's like the full title, really clung on to that abusive term. And what they were going to do, they tried to make it so that whoever's giving the credit, so those like little payday, those really short term payday loans, they would have to give like a whole background credit analysis before it would be handed out, right? They would have to be able to figure out, do they have an ability to repay? And like that amount of sort of operational and credit underwriting would essentially get rid of the payday business at all. You just can't afford it, right? Usually it's just like, look, I don't know who you are. You need it for this short term. I'll give you a really high interest rate. And in like 2 weeks, pay me back. But now they're saying, give me a bunch of information about who you are, what this is, and I'll decide whether or not we can underwrite it. So that's kind of where this gets into the sticky idea of sort of a regulated versus a free market kind of philosophy. So the free market types, they'll come out and say, look, these are, we don't know exactly what the situation is, but we have a supply and we have a demand, and we have two people coming together, agreeing on terms, and they're going and they engage in the transaction. Who are we to kind of get in the way and say, no, this isn't right? But like the other half of this is like, it does kind of feel like they're, the people who needs the payday loan are being taken advantage of. I mean, some of like the interest rates are huge, like on an annual basis. They're, insane. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't feel right either. And so that's sort of the regulatory side of it. The other one, and more recently in the context of Doge, they consider it redundant. So there's already a lot of regulators, and you don't really need another one, especially when that's costing something like 700 million or something a year, whatever it is. I think Doge has the numbers.
How many people work there, just very roughly speaking? Like, is this a really large organization, or is this small and lean?
Yeah, let's take a look. We can look at the workforce. I looked this up. So, well, heck, why don't I just put it up here? I mean, it's got a headcount of 16. Let's call it 1,700. The wages, I guess, are 311 million. So there you go. I mean, it's pretty big. One of the things that stood out to me, actually, because I did look at this, was the salary. I mean, a lot of times when you open this up, you can see salary distributions are mostly over here, sort of in like the 70, 80, 90. That's kind of where they're clumped. But at the CFPB, man, there's like 270 employees are making over 200,000. I mean, like
that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, the men and women at the CFPB are getting paid, and then they're,
Yeah, I mean, I guess because finance is centered in New York, right? I'm just making some assumption that a lot of the work that they do is centered in New York.
Oh man, there's no reason that these biggest bars should be on the right side of the graph.
And so like
there's no way they should be over there. They should be like over here.
Be over there.
Yeah, this distribution's all messed up. It should be like this.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
and then just like all the other agencies, like they barely get over like 100K, I think, like you're way into the tail already once you're getting into like 100, 150.
So anyway, they want it dead. And this is how they did it. On February 3rd, I guess the Treasury, the new one, Besant kind of came in and issued a directive, and they said the CFPB is going to freeze all rulemaking, litigation, and enforcement activities. They know the higher level laws, and the interpretations are kind of changing depending on whatever they need. And it's turned into, they can kind of like almost make up laws in the form of regulations and rules. And that's actually another focus of Doge. But anyway,
Interesting.
by February 8th, I guess the acting director, Russell Vogt, I actually don't know how to pronounce it. He expanded the stop to, stop work, including working on bigger banks. He basically was just like, stop doing anything. And, this guy is kind of important because his name, I guess, is on like Project 2025. He's like one of the authors.
I've heard of that before, I think.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, Kamala and every Democrat screamed about it for
a long time,
about a year.
Yeah, it got to the point where, anyway, some of my family members were like legit scared, and I was like, "Oh, it's ridiculous." So how dumb did I feel when it's like, "Oh, look, this is good," here's one of the authors running one of the agencies into the ground as fast and as best as he could. But anyway, so there were protests, after February 10th. Vogt's like, stop coming to work. Protests, hands off our CFPB being waved around. Around this time, Musk on several occasions suggested that CFPB was dead, and cited that there were, too many overlapping regulatory agencies. On February 11th, in response, we got some of the heavy hitters from the Democratic Party. So we got, Elizabeth, Maxine, Charles, Bernard. Well, they wrote a, public letter. And if you read the letter, it kind of sounds like, they're painting the picture that, they
will be very angry.
They're upset. And they're going to seize control of the CFPB's inner workings. And it's a reward to the billionaires who backed Trump. And this is going even at the expense of Americans. It also suggested that Musk, his incursion into the CFPB was really, like, the real reason was to gain access to data, so that Musk could better advance his X Cash app. So
aren't
aside,
the people on the left the ones that
conspiracy theories?
Yeah,
that's exactly what I thought. I was like, wow, thank you for these.
At least it's consistent. You basically just make a conspiracy theory against anything that you don't like. And that's pretty natural, right? Coping mechanism.
The 11th, about 73 staff, I guess, were fired via email. 2 senior officials resigned. In February 13th, a temporary restraining order was requested by the National Treasury Employees Union. And on the 14th, so, I got to say, we do sometimes say that the legal system works kind of slowly, but sometimes it works really quickly. We're talking days here. So the next day, this was Judge Amy Berman Jackson. So that she upheld the temporary restraining order, and it blocked further terminations beyond those that were already fired. It prohibited destroying or removing CFPB data, and it, prevented Russell, so the acting head, from defunding the agency by transferring its reserve fund. The hearing, kind of more broadly for this case, is going to happen on March 3rd. So it's just coming up, and we'll be able to get more of this story.
Day before the Mexico-Canada tariffs are going to go into effect.
You just got to forget about tariffs for a second, Joe. We're talking about something else. Jesus, just cover tariffs.
Hey, so it's the most beautiful word in the English language, he said, right?
I don't know. Is that what he said?
Oh, yeah.
Joe, I don't follow this.
Yeah, he said it a lot.
So what do you think? Are you for or against the shuttering of the CFPB?
I mean,
what do you think, man? In this context, in this day and age, basically, what's happening?
I mean, just given that salary distribution, I don't know.
It's pretty nice, right? I mean, at least, yeah, even that kind of.
I mean, I guess it's tough to say because I thought that Wells Fargo thing was carried out by the Fed, first of all, and you hear about some of these other things. I thought these were the supervisory entities. Doing this.
I think. The way that the first major sort of philosophical point that I kind of drilled down to was something that it was it's sort of a lesson that I was taught like a long time ago when I was trying to get my SCUBA certification, and specifically my rescue diver certification.
I like where this
Yeah,
is
like
going
where this
here.
is going. And I was like 15 or something, and there's like a story there. My dad made me get it, and one of the things, as a kid, one of the things that we were taught was, as a rescue diver, it's like you just make sure that the most important thing right at that moment is for you not to get into danger. And that's a little bit counterintuitive, because you're there to kind of help the person, but really the first rule is that you can't be put into a situation where you also become a victim, because then you're not going to help anyone. So it's like the first thing is just make sure you're safe. And thinking about that kind of lesson in the context of what's happening here with Doge, and then with kind of the consumer fight, the CFPB, right now, the US, in my view, is in a lot of trouble because it is spending far, far beyond its means. And it is absolutely not sustainable. Like, we are in trouble. And as it is now with the current budget, we are not in a position to help anyone else. So if you want to put forward the idea that the CFPB is doing a lot of good, and I think it does do some good, but you can no longer do that good. It's unsustainable if the US can't pay its bills, if it goes, if it defaults, which it will happen if we continue on this path. So I think first and foremost, what's more important right now than what maybe the CFPB is doing is to make sure that the US can pay its bills today, tomorrow, and 100 years from now.
I mean, makes sense. Every penny counts. And what did you say before? Like 700 million a year it costs.
Yeah, let me get,
because like in the context of an entire government agency that has $100 billion budget, couple $100 billion budget, that is just a rounding error. But I guess that's the whole point of Doge as well. Just, round up all of these rounding errors, and now suddenly you're not just a couple decimal points out, but you're a few percent. And their goal is to get to 15% roughly, $1 trillion or so. So, definitely can't argue with that perspective. But without knowing like a more in-depth history of the actions that they've taken and what has come out with that, it's tough to say, because in the press recently, it's like I mentioned earlier, like there's this Capital One.
Yeah. So, all right, you want to know earlier, like how much money actually comes to the CFPB? Yeah, here it is. So this is, the CFPB financial report, and they're kind of summarizing what they're getting. It's, north of 700 million for 2024. Anyway, let us know what you think below. That's it for the Root of All Evil podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Luke.
I'm Joe. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.